She was a beautiful young mother who cherished her daughters more than anything.
My mom was very, very active with myself and my sister.
She fought for us no matter what.
So finding romance was the last thing on her mind, until it found her.
She was a shoulder for him to cry on. They had a spark.
My sister was like, hey, I have a new boyfriend and I want y'all to meet him.
She felt like he might have been the one.
But when she goes missing, could he be to blame?
He was away during the time of the murder.
I knew it was something really, really wrong.
A trail of clues leads police to a disturbing crime scene.
There's blood everywhere.
It was horrific. I couldn't breathe.
Life went upside down.
And the unbelievable con that ended up in murder.
It was like, wow, are you serious?
He was supposed to be in prison.
She fought to keep her life from ending.
It gives me chills all these years later.
February 4th, 1995. It's a typical Saturday in Tulsa, a city of 375,000 in the heart of Oklahoma oil country.
Tulsa is, I think, probably one of the jewels of Oklahoma. It's a great city. You have all the arts and entertainment, restaurants, good bars to go to.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad when you say that you're from Tulsa because there's a lot of crime that happens here.
I would say it's a safe community, but I would say per capita we have a high homicide rate. I've grappled with it my whole career.
So when local resident Maxine Thomas makes a call to Tulsa police in the middle of the night, they're prepared to spring into action.
Tulsa Police, how can I help you?
Yes, I need to file a missing persons report.
Maxine says her friend Sharonda Clark has disappeared. No one has seen or heard from Sharonda in over 12 hours.
Maxine says the 20-year-old mother of two had failed to pick her children up from daycare earlier that evening.
Sharonda had a 4-year-old daughter and a 1.5-year-old daughter, and they were at the daycare, and she didn't go to pick them up as normal.
She always picks her kids up after work. There's no way she would have left them there without telling anyone.
That day, it just kept getting later and later, and slowly the daycare emptied. It was just myself, my sister, and the workers for the daycare. They were calling, but no one was coming or picking up.
Since Maxine was listed as an emergency contact, she was able to step in for Sharonda's two girls.
Fortunately, she was able to come and get them.
I picked up the girls. We went to Sharonda's to look for her.
We go and knock on the door to see if we could get my mom to answer, but no one answered. That was a really, really big flag for myself at the age of 4.
She's a good mom. She wouldn't just abandon her kids like this.
That wasn't like Sharonda to not communicate. She never, ever, ever done that.
Sharonda was the type of mother who would stop whatever she was doing to make sure that her kids are okay.
Something must have happened to her. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay, we're going to send 2 units out to that location.
My mom was very, very active with myself and my sister. She was that parent, so I knew it was something really, really wrong.
They were worried about what could be happening to Sharonda.
For 20-year-old Sharonda Clark, motherhood began at a young age.
She was 14 when she first became a mom.
Of course, my grandparents didn't want her to become a teen parent, but she did. I'm her oldest, and she was her mom's oldest as well. So in a lot of ways, we were a lot alike. Her being brand new to parenting, me being brand new.
She loved her daughter, Ye-Shin. She did. She really did. She stopped school to take care of her baby, and so she did odd jobs until she was old enough to work at a real job. The father was real young, too.
was about 15. So it was hard.
However, Sharonda's friends and family rallied around her to help.
We always kicked in and made sure that she had diapers. We worked together to do the best that she could for her daughter. It takes a village. That's all I can say.
Do you need me to still watch her tomorrow?
Oh, yes, that would be amazing. You know, she loves her Auntie Jamaica.
I love her too.
I know.
In the spring of 1992, Sharonda became pregnant again, this time with her daughter, Majorine.
I was 12 when Majorine was born, and it was just like having another little sister, little sibling.
She loved that little baby. Oh my goodness. She was always smiling, always smiling.
Majorine's father was a man from the neighborhood, Travis Wells.
How's she doing?
Good. I think she's about to fall asleep.
My mom and my daddy were crazy. Crazy about each other.
So much so that they decided to tie the knot right after Majorine was born.
She was a young married mom, so she experienced not only being a teenage mom, but she also experienced being a teen wife.
She was still really young, but she made good decisions and strong decisions, and there was nobody that was going to tell her different.
She loves the family she's built.
But unfortunately, just 1 year into the marriage, it began to crumble.
They just began to grow apart, which could happen in any marriage, especially when you start a marriage so young.
That relationship didn't work out.
They ended up separating when Sharonda was 19 years old.
But Sharonda didn't let such a jarring life change get her down.
Sharonda continued to do whatever it took to provide for her 2 children. She worked multiple jobs. She became a manager of a retail chain.
She, with 2 young children, found her own place. She paid her own bills.
Sharonda was a fighter.
She fought for us no matter what. Do anything for us that she could to try to protect us.
As a single mom, Sharonda's busy life didn't leave much time for romance. But later that same year, she'd find a connection in a place she least expected it.
Hey, you okay?
Initially, Sharonda had met Jermaine at his brother's funeral, and being the caring kind of person that she was a shoulder for him to cry on.
I just can't believe he's gone. It's like it hasn't sunk in yet.
23-year-old Jermaine Cannon welcomed Sharonda's compassionate spirit with open arms.
That's how they started communicating. Just to have somebody to talk to laugh with, because she was so funny. And you know, just to give him a head change.
I bet he's living large up there, though.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Sharonda was a light to everyone who met her, including Jermaine.
Before long, their friendship turned into a romance, a relationship that Sharonda was hopeful would finally be the one.
My sister called up to my parents and was like, hey, I have a new boyfriend and I want y'all to meet him.
She was taking things slowly, but her heart was open.
However, it's been more than 12 hours since anyone has seen or heard from Sharonda, and fears are mounting that something terrible may have happened to her.
Sharonda Clarke is missing.
She hadn't picked up her kids from daycare.
That wasn't like Sharonda to not communicate.
All right, thank you.
A missing persons report is filed.
Tulsa police begin their investigation by heading to Sharonda's apartment.
The police basically broke in the door.
Police!
When police got inside, they found overturned furniture, spilled food, and bloody walls, indicating a struggle that took place.
There's blood in the kitchen, there's blood in the living room, there's shoe marks of blood all over.
But nothing could prepare police for what they find when they look into the hallway.
They witness a horrendous scene.
There was so much blood.
She didn't deserve this.
After separating from her husband, Travis Wells, 20-year-old mother of two, Sharonda Clark, had come out on the other side even stronger.
Sharonda was headed in the right direction.
She was willing to do whatever it takes to provide for her two children.
She made sure that we were always together.
Working, tending to us, maintaining friendships, nothing seemed to stop her.
And when she met 23-year-old Jermaine Cannon at the most unlikely of places, it seemed as if she might get another chance at love.
She wound up finding someone who respected and appreciated and loved her.
But in February of 1995, as Valentine's Day approaches, police have discovered a bloody scene inside Sharonda's apartment.
As police were investigating the scene, they noticed a trail of blood leading into the hallway. And when they followed it, they witnessed an even more grisly scene.
They saw the victim laying on the floor, on her back.
Sharonda Clark was dead.
The responding officers immediately call for backup.
I was on call that specific day and night, and you always know when your pager goes off, we still carried pagers then, that you were ready to go. I mean, it was just expected that you were going to have to get out and see something that you really didn't want to see.
When Detective Fultz arrives on the scene, it's clear he's looking at a homicide.
We started looking at the victim and noticed quite a few stab marks on her body.
Someone stabbed her 3 times in the neck region, which severed her carotid artery, her jugular, and then the final blow was a stab wound to the chest.
Apart from those fatal blows, Sharonda also suffered numerous smaller cuts to her hands and arms.
She had what's called defensive wounds. You can imagine a knife coming down on you, and she's got her hand up in the air trying to protect herself.
I certainly believe that she did everything she could to keep her life from ending. She fought, she struggled.
Near Sharonda's body, investigators find what they believe is the murder weapon.
The knife was found fairly close to the body. The handle was broken. It was very bloody.
They bag it up for further examination.
Police find more signs of violence inside Sharonda's bedroom.
They found a trail of blood leading to the bedroom.
In the bedroom, everything was in disarray.
There's blood everywhere and spatter on the walls.
It was apparent from looking at the blood stains and the blood trails that the majority of violence and the stabbing occurred in the bedroom. Our suspect had stabbed the victim numerous times and then dragged her from the bedroom into the hallway.
There's something else in the bedroom that catches investigators' attention.
There was a broken window in the bedroom.
At first glance, it appears to be a robbery. But when police further investigate, they find the window had been broken from the inside.
It looks like the window was broken when Sharonda was struggling against her killer.
Other evidence also runs counter to the robbery theory.
There's no signs of forced entry. Nothing appears to be missing.
It looked like Sharonda had let this person into the house.
Someone that uses a knife when it's up close like this, it's extremely personal. It shows me as an investigator that this person had absolutely no regard but rage toward our victim.
When the tragic news reaches Sharonda's loved ones, they're devastated.
I've seen my dad cry, but not like that. My first thought was, why did this happen? How could this happen to our family?
I couldn't breathe. It was devastating for something like that extreme to happen to somebody that you love so much.
You hear mom's gone, mom's not coming back. Almost immediately, life went upside down.
As the sun comes up over Tulsa, investigators start canvassing the apartment complex for potential witnesses.
Investigators reached out to neighbors to see if they had seen anything.
One woman tells police she was friendly with Sharonda, and the young mother was well-liked among the other residents at the apartment complex.
She got along with everybody. People loved to hang out with her.
But Sharonda's neighbor also says she noticed something unusual on Friday afternoon, the day Sharonda disappeared.
I was coming home from the store earlier, and I saw her outside talking to somebody.
According to the neighbor, the two appeared to be in a heated exchange, some type of argument.
They were really going at it, and I can tell she was pretty upset.
To police, it looks like this person could be Sharonda's killer.
Get away from me!
Thanks to one of Sharonda Clark's neighbors, Tulsa detectives have learned that the mother of two was spotted arguing with an unidentified man on the afternoon before her death.
Did you hear what they were arguing about?
No, they were too far away, but it looked pretty heated.
She didn't know the cause of the argument.
But she was worried about Sharonda, and so later on that night, she gave her a call.
She called about 5:30 p.m.
The phone rang, and then somebody finally answered, but it wasn't Sharonda.
Hello?
It's a man. The neighbor believes it was the same man who was arguing with Sharonda that day.
Hi, may I please speak to Sharonda?
Yeah, Sharonda's not here right now.
He was telling her that Sharonda was not there, but she could hear Sharonda in the background, and then he ended up hanging up on her. And that was probably the last time anybody heard Sharonda alive.
Detectives are hoping her neighbor can help them identify Sharonda's mysterious male companion.
Investigators asked the neighbor if she could recognize him, if she knew what he looked like, what he was wearing.
But they're out of luck.
I saw them from pretty far away, so I really couldn't get a very good look at him.
All that she could recall was that he was a black man in his 20s.
Thank you for your time, man.
Tracking down this new suspect is now investigators' #1 priority.
Sharonda recently separated from her ex-husband, Travis Wells.
Could he be the person she was arguing with that day?
In cases like this, police usually start their investigation with those closest to the victim or anyone they've recently had a disagreement with.
However, it's soon clear Sharonda and her ex didn't have any bad blood.
They were still on amicable terms, that they had exchanged and arranged visitation for their child.
They both got along with one another and were co-parenting and being able to communicate with each other.
After their separation, Travis hadn't even stayed in Tulsa.
Majorene's dad, he moved to Ohio and didn't come back.
He was away during the time of the murder.
Without Travis Wells as a suspect, detectives are back at square one.
Next, investigators subpoena Sharonda's phone records and her bank records, hoping to find something that will give them a clue to what happened.
As detectives pore over the records, they're looking for anything that might raise a red flag.
They looked through all of her recent communications and transactions, but nothing stood out.
They come up empty.
Forensic testing on the murder weapon also leads to a dead end.
They were hoping to recover some fingerprints from the knife, but there was nothing there.
Less than 24 hours into their murder investigation, detectives are already running out of leads. But when they start reaching out to Sharonda's circle of friends, they finally make some headway.
one of Sharonda's friends tells them that she knows of a man Sharonda had been seeing.
Yeah. She met this guy at the funeral for his brother. His name is Jermaine Cannon.
The two of them really hit it off, and Sharonda seemed happy.
However, Sharonda's romance with Jermaine soon hit a roadblock.
One day, Jermaine was just gone.
She told me he took off. She didn't know where he went or what happened to him.
She kind of felt like he might have been the one. Then he disappeared.
She was devastated. She had opened her heart up to someone. Had she missed something?
However, in January of 1995, Jermaine reappeared.
Out of nowhere, Jermaine landed back on her doorstep. Sharonda was shocked.
Did you miss me?
Jermaine? What are you doing here?
Sharonda was happy to see him.
But she was also hesitant to let Jermaine back into her life.
She couldn't rid her mind of those questions. What happened? Why did he leave?
It's been months, Jermaine. Where have you been?
He said, I had to go out of town to take care of some family stuff. He kind of dodged the question, and then he asked Sharonda if he could stay with her.
Why didn't you just let me know where you were going? You just up and left.
I'm sorry, baby. It all happened so fast, but I'm here now. We can be together again.
I don't think she was really comfortable with it, but she said he could stay. He didn't have any place else to go.
She still wanted to carry on this relationship. She just loved him unconditionally.
But after Jermaine moved in, Sharonda quickly came to regret her decision.
She didn't feel like he was being totally honest with her.
Sharonda was probably pulling away from the relationship, and that's when the aggression started.
Jermaine turned violent.
They were fighting. People were starting to notice bruises on Sharonda.
And as the tensions grew, Sharonda confronted Jermaine over his lies.
What do you want?
I want to know where you've been all these months. And I want the truth this time.
Fine, okay? You really want to know?
She found out that he was escaped from jail.
He was a wanted man.
Police in Tulsa, Oklahoma have been trying to identify the man Sharonda Clark was seen arguing with on the day before her body was found.
A neighbor reported seeing Sharonda having an intense argument outside of her apartment with a young black male.
Now, thanks to one of Sharonda's close friends, police think they know who that man was. 23-year-old Jermaine Cannon.
According to the friend, Jermaine and Sharonda had a tumultuous relationship.
A relationship that became even more turbulent after Sharonda learned the truth about her new beau.
I want to know where you've been all these months. And I want the truth this time.
Fine. You really want to know?
Jermaine had been in prison.
What do you mean prison?
I mean, I got locked up, but then I got away.
On the day that he showed up at her door, he'd escaped. The news just shocked Sharonda.
When she told me that, I knew he was bad news. I told her she needed to get away from him.
Sharonda wholeheartedly agreed.
If she knew what had occurred as far as him being an escapee, I really don't have any doubt that she wouldn't have let him in her apartment.
She knew she couldn't have that around her children.
Now, do you have any recollection of Jermaine?
Here and there, like glimpses of him coming in, not really knowing who he was, you know, being a kid asking, who is this, who's staying over, that kind of thing. So it wasn't like, oh, he had been here for a long time.
In the days before she was killed, friends believe Sharonda had been making plans to remove Jermaine from her apartment and her life for good.
She was preparing to kick him out.
One day, Sharonda called her friend, asking if she could watch her children because she was worried about them being in the house.
Sharonda had called my mother and told her that I needed to get a hold of her ASAP. So I called her phone, but I didn't get any answer from her. I was a little concerned, but I wasn't really too stressed about it because I wasn't sure exactly what she wanted.
Sharonda made these calls. On the same day, the neighbors saw her arguing with the man outside.
For detectives, the picture of what happened to Sharonda is becoming clearer.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming down.
So now detectives are starting to put this puzzle together. They think what the neighbors saw was Sharonda kicking Jermaine out of her apartment.
When detectives run a background check on Jermaine, they're able to confirm much of what Sharonda's friends have told them.
We determined that Mr. Cannon has had a history of being violent toward women.
Police came across an incident report involving a woman who claimed that Jermaine had burglarized and assaulted her.
He snuck in through a basement window, and she woke up with his hand over her mouth.
A more recent arrest suggests that Jermaine's pattern of violence has been escalating.
The second woman, a former girlfriend, he ended up getting into an argument with her and tried to kill her by using an iron, a toaster, and a hammer, and left her for dead.
She was very fortunate not to have been killed.
He got prosecuted for an assault and battery with intent to kill and got 15 years.
But Jermaine wasn't behind bars for long.
They quickly learned that he had indeed escaped prison.
It was a medium security type facility where they had some freedom. They weren't locked down all the time.
And for whatever reason, he got it in his head that I've had enough of this being incarcerated.
He stole a bus and made his way to Tulsa.
Now, detectives are more determined than ever to track down Jermaine. But that proves easier said than done.
No one has seen him since the day before Sharonda's disappearance.
However, their luck changes when police receive intel from an unexpected source.
The lead detective gets a call. A woman claims to have information about Sharonda's case.
Yes. Is this the detective who's looking for Jermaine Cannon?
Yes, ma'am.
The caller is Jermaine's mother.
She knew her son was in trouble.
She put the pieces together.
Police in Tulsa, Oklahoma have discovered that just a few weeks before she was killed, Sharonda Clark had been tricked into welcoming an escaped convict into her home.
I was in prison.
Jermaine Cannon stole a truck, ended up in Tulsa, and she was just trying to help him out.
Now investigators are searching for the suspected killer, and they've just received a promising lead on his whereabouts.
Yes, ma'am.
They received a phone call from Jermaine's mother. She tipped them off that he had gone to Flint, Michigan.
So you're saying he's in Flint right now?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know this?
He told me himself.
She tells investigators that Jermaine called her, and it surprised her because she knew he was supposed to be in prison.
Somehow or other, he had gotten out of prison, and he said that he was about to take a bus to Flint.
Why Flint?
That's where his uncle is.
Jermaine also told his mother the police were after him for something he didn't do.
That something was the murder of Sharonda Clark.
Jermaine told his mother that he did get in a fight with Sharonda, but it wasn't what it looked like. He insisted on that.
The family didn't want to believe that Jermaine would do this, but they also understood that it was very likely that he had. Given his actions, the fact that he had been staying there, the fact that he had escaped from prison.
I told him to turn himself in, but he wouldn't listen to me.
Okay, thank you.
After speaking with Jermaine's mother, Tulsa detectives immediately reach out to law enforcement in Michigan.
They contacted the Flint Police Department and were arranging to have Jermaine arrested at his uncle's house.
But before they can make their move, investigators receive another surprising phone call.
Jermaine actually called Detective Fultz.
He called me. Pretty unusual for a suspect to voluntarily call, but his family had convinced him that it would be in his best interest.
Jermaine tells investigators he knows what the crime scene looks like. He knows how bad it is, but he wants them to give him a chance to tell his side of the story.
Within hours, Jermaine turns himself over to law enforcement.
Investigators explain to Jermaine that they already know he escaped from prison. They ask him to start from there.
Jermaine says once he made his escape, he headed straight for Sharonda's apartment.
He went to Sharonda because they had a spark before he'd gone to prison.
Look, I needed some place to go where I thought the cops wouldn't find me. And I thought that maybe she would let me stay with her.
Jermaine tells investigators that they quickly hit it off. Things were going good for a while, but eventually they began arguing.
Then she started getting on my case about every little thing, you know, and
He's painting Sharonda as the aggressor in this relationship. He claimed that she was violent and she was intimidating.
Then, on February 3rd, he says the tensions reached a breaking point.
Jermaine tells investigators that he decided to leave, but he was worried about what Sharonda might do to him, and so he wasn't gonna tell her.
Look, I was gonna just slip out, okay? Because, I just didn't need her going off on me again.
But Jermaine says before he could make his exit, Sharonda realized what he was up to.
As he was packing up his things, Sharonda came and questioned him. "What are you doing?"
I can't do this anymore, Sharonda.
What do you mean?
I can't do this no more.
What can't you do?
This!
So you're leaving?
Yes.
He said I was leaving her and she didn't want me to leave.
And she was really mad and she started physically attacking me.
He says after a while, he had no choice but to fight back.
During the struggle, Jermaine says they shattered Sharonda's bedroom windows.
Jermaine says Sharonda went ballistic, lunging at him with a knife, cutting him. The struggle ensued to get control of it.
In the struggle, the knife hit the floor. They both looked at the knife and he dove for it.
After tracking their suspect almost 1,000 miles from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Flint, Michigan, homicide detectives have arrested Jermaine Cannon for the murder of his girlfriend, Sharonda Clark.
He showed us that he was a very dangerous man. Here's a guy that can't stay out of custody 22 days before he tries to kill somebody else.
But according to Jermaine, Sharonda was the dangerous one in their relationship.
Jermaine's side of the story was that Sharonda was the aggressor and that he was afraid of Sharonda.
Jermaine tells police that on February 3rd, he and Sharonda got into an argument when he revealed that he was leaving her.
Jermaine says she spiraled out of control.
He said we got in an argument and she pulled a knife on him.
Chill. He was able to gain control of the knife to protect himself.
He admitted that he killed her, but he said he did it in self-defense.
Jermaine says once he realized what he'd done, he tried to help Sharonda.
Look, I didn't want her to die.
He tries to drag her body to the bathroom to find something to stop the bleeding.
He said I was gonna get her first aid.
But Jermaine could tell that Sharonda was already dead.
I couldn't call the cops because, I was a wanted man.
So what did you do?
I got out of there.
He then bought a bus ticket to Flint, Michigan, and went up and knocked on his uncle's door.
Mr. Cannon did not admit that he was at fault. He blamed the victim for the whole thing, said it was all her fault.
Investigators don't buy a word of it.
It's nothing but a story, because there's nothing in evidence that supports his story.
For one thing, Jermaine doesn't have any of the defensive wounds detectives would expect to see if Sharonda had really attacked him with a knife.
He shows detectives his hand.
Didn't have a scratch on it.
What Jermaine was saying couldn't possibly be true. There was no way that she was the aggressor in this situation.
It was the bloodiest scene I'd ever prosecuted. The amount of blood indicating that she was running, trying to get away from him until she couldn't get away anymore. So there just wasn't anything to support his story.
Investigators charged him with first-degree murder.
When Jermaine's trial begins on March 12, 1996, prosecutors outline what they believe really happened that night.
They say that the argument Sharonda's neighbor witnessed was her confronting him over his lies and abuse.
Sharonda wanted him to leave.
But for Jermaine, that wasn't an option.
If she put him out, he would have nowhere to go.
He knew that things would be only worse for him if he had to go back to prison after escaping.
Instead of packing his bags, Jermaine stood his ground.
You think I'm gonna let you kick me out after everything I went through?
He enjoyed his freedom, and he wasn't gonna let anyone, not even Sharonda, stop him.
Jermaine was enraged and tried to beat Sharonda into submission.
But when that wasn't enough, Jermaine went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife.
Get away. Get away from me. Get away from me.
He then started to chase her through the house.
She's running all over this house trying to save her life. I mean, the sheer terror that she went through.
He stabbed Sharonda in cold blood.
He ended up stabbing her 4 times. It gives me chills all these years later. I'm sure it did the same thing to the jury.
Jermaine's own demeanor in the courtroom does little to help his case.
During the trial, he was sitting there with a smile on his face. And it was like, wow, are you serious?
When I saw him, I was kind of shocked. He had this cocky attitude about him, like, yeah, I'm gonna win. There was no remorse. He didn't care.
It takes the jury just 2 short hours to reach a decision.
The jury found Jermaine Cannon guilty of first-degree murder.
It was tears, like, yes, finally, we were happy and relieved.
The jury sentenced him to death by lethal injection, and ultimately, that sentence was carried out July 20th, 2023.
More than 28 years after her murder, Sharonda's loved ones are present for Jermaine's execution.
So we get in the room first, and you could see him mouthing and talking to his family like, I love you, and thumbs up, and grinning. And I'm just like, I'm instantly irritated because my mom didn't get to do any of this. She didn't get to pick her last meal. She damn sure didn't get to say goodbye to anybody. So it was like a slap in the face. It kind of felt like we were doing a make-a-wish for a death row individual.
Jermaine Cannon had an opportunity to say some last words before they started the execution.
His final words are, I confess with my mouth and believe with my heart that God raised Jesus from the dead. Therefore, I am saved.
I know it hurt my niece, my oldest niece, Yashin, more because he got to live basically a whole nother 30 years, a whole life.
Afterwards, I felt confused. I mean, I was happy that I was there. I was happy that I seen it through. I was happy that I got to support my mom when she couldn't. It was just disappointing in the mannerism of how the system was set up to carry it out.
It's a very sobering experience. You never really want to witness somebody's death. However, in my opinion, the earth is a better place without Jermaine Cannon on it.
Nearly 3 decades later, Sharonda's daughters are still struggling to cope with their mother's death.
I'm still dealing with it. I'm angry, lost, kind of. The only thing that really helps me navigate through it is my family.
I'll never forget where I came from, the things that she did for me, the sacrifices that she made. She may not be here in flesh, but she's definitely here in spirit.
The town of Bellmere had the kind of silence people trusted, a place where front doors stayed unlocked until midnight, where pastors shook every hand after Sunday service, where mothers let their children ride bicycles beneath flickering streetlights without fear. It sat quietly between long highways and dying farmland in the American Midwest, hidden behind rows of wheat fields and weather-beaten churches that looked untouched by time. Nothing violent was supposed to happen there. Nothing evil was supposed to survive there. But on the morning of October 14th, 1987, that illusion shattered beside a drainage ditch less than half a mile from St. Luke's Church. The body was discovered just after sunrise by a farmer driving his pickup toward County Road 8. At first he thought it was a mannequin dumped in the weeds. Then he saw the hair moving in the wind. Long blonde strands tangled with mud and dead grass. One shoe missing, bare legs covered in scratches. The farmer stopped breathing for several seconds before stumbling back toward his truck and radioing. Police with a voice so shaky dispatchers could barely understand him. By the time deputies arrived, the fog still hadn't lifted from the fields. Yellow tape stretched across the ditch while deputies whispered to each other in stunned silence. Nobody in Bellmere had ever seen a murder scene before, especially not one like this. The victim was 23-year-old Emily Harper, a kindergarten teacher known for volunteering at church events and singing in the St. Luke's choir every Sunday morning. People described her with the same words over and over again. Sweet, gentle, trustworthy. The kind of woman who baked pies for grieving neighbors and remembered every child's birthday in town. The kind of woman nobody could imagine becoming the center of a homicide investigation. Her face was bruised. Her necklace was gone. There were signs she had fought desperately before she died. Mud packed beneath her fingernails. Deep cuts along her wrists. One earring torn free hard enough to leave blood along the side of her neck. Detectives immediately believed she knew her killer. There were no signs of robbery. Her purse had been found inside her car parked outside St. Luke's Church the previous evening. The keys were still in the ignition. The headlights remained on all night until the battery died. Witnesses reported seeing Emily leave choir practice around 9:15 p.m. She waved goodbye to several church members and walked alone toward the parking lot. After that, she vanished into darkness less than 100 yards from the church entrance. The brutality of the attack sent shockwaves through Bellmere before noon. Parents locked their doors for the first time in years. Businesses closed early. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed a drifter passing through town was responsible. Others whispered about satanic cults hidden in the countryside. But the most terrifying possibility was the one nobody wanted to say out loud. What if the killer belonged to Bellmere itself? Investigators worked through the night, collecting evidence from the ditch. Tire tracks, fibers, hair samples, a partial footprint pressed into wet soil near the road. Forensic teams recovered biological evidence from beneath Emily's fingernails and preserved it, carefully inside sealed containers. In 1987, DNA testing was still primitive and rarely used outside major cities. Detectives hoped the evidence might matter one day, but most believed the case would be solved long before science became necessary. They were wrong. Within 48 hours, Bellmere police assembled a list of possible suspects. An ex-boyfriend from 2 years earlier. A mechanic who allegedly flirted with Emily repeatedly despite her rejections. A truck driver spotted near the church parking lot around the time she disappeared. Detectives interrogated each one aggressively. None matched the evidence. None cracked under pressure. Meanwhile, the funeral drew nearly the entire town. Hundreds packed inside St. Luke's Church while cameras from regional news stations lined the sidewalks outside. People cried openly as Pastor Daniel Reeves stepped behind the pulpit and delivered a eulogy so emotional several mourners later described it as unforgettable. Reeves was 61 years old then, a respected spiritual leader with silver hair, calm eyes, and a voice that carried warmth through every sentence. He had baptized half the town, married generations of families, helped addicts recover, paid grocery bills for struggling widows without telling anyone. In Belmere, Pastor Reeves wasn't just admired. He was trusted absolutely. During the service, he described Emily as a daughter of God stolen by darkness. He paused several times to wipe tears from his eyes. At one point, he nearly lost composure entirely while comforting Emily's mother near the front pews. Television cameras captured the moment and replayed it repeatedly across local broadcasts. The grieving pastor became the face of Belmere's pain. Nobody watching suspected he might also become the center of its greatest nightmare. Weeks turned into months. Leads dried up. Detectives expanded their search statewide, chasing tips from psychics, prison informants, and anonymous callers claiming secret knowledge about the murder. One man confessed after a drunken bar fight, only to later admit he fabricated the story for attention. Another suspect failed a polygraph, but possessed a verified alibi. Every promising direction collapsed eventually into frustration and dead ends. The media labeled Emily Harper's murder the Belmere Church case, transforming the small town into a symbol of unresolved horror. National tabloids published sensational headlines asking whether a killer was hiding inside America's heartland churches. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some residents accused police of incompetence. Others feared authorities were protecting someone powerful. Fear poisoned the community slowly. Attendance at St. Luke's Church declined. Parents stopped allowing children to attend evening activities alone. Businesses installed locks and security cameras. Yet through all of it, Pastor Reeves remained the town's emotional anchor. He organized candlelight vigils, led prayer circles, comforted grieving residents one by one. Detectives interviewed him twice during the early investigation because he had been among the last people to see Emily alive. But nothing about his statements raised concern. He described finishing paperwork inside his office while choir members left the building. He claimed he locked the church around 9:30 p.m. and drove home alone. His timeline appeared consistent. Multiple witnesses remembered seeing his car leave the parking lot shortly afterward. Besides, investigators had no reason to suspect him. Pastor Reeves had no criminal record, no known history of violence, no obvious motive. He was practically untouchable in the eyes of the town. The case slowly froze into silence. Years passed. Detectives retired. Evidence boxes gathered dust inside county storage rooms. Emily's parents aged beneath the weight of unanswered grief. Her mother reportedly kept Emily's bedroom untouched for nearly 15 years. Clothes hanging exactly where she left them. Makeup still beside the mirror. A choir photograph pinned above the bed showing a smiling young woman standing only feet away from the man who may have murdered her. Belmere itself changed with time. Factories closed. Young families moved away. St. Luke's Church lost members. But every October, flowers still appeared near the drainage ditch where Emily's body had been found. Some residents claimed the area felt wrong after sunset. Hunters avoided it. Drivers accelerated past it without looking. Stories spread among teenagers about hearing screams near the fields late at night. Most dismissed those stories as local folklore born from tragedy. Yet the fear never fully disappeared. Neither did the killer. In 1996, nearly 9 years after the murder, Investigators reopened the case briefly after advances in forensic science made DNA analysis more reliable. Detectives submitted preserved biological samples collected beneath Emily's fingernails to a state laboratory, hoping technology might finally reveal the truth. Weeks later, the results arrived. Male DNA had indeed been recovered. The killer had left part of himself behind during the struggle. For the first time in nearly a decade, hope returned to Bellemere. But there was one devastating problem. The DNA profile matched nobody in the national database. Detectives had a genetic fingerprint without a name attached to it. The investigation stalled again almost immediately. Over the next 20 years, the case drifted in and out of headlines whenever anniversaries approached. New detectives reviewed old files. Amateur investigators launched online forums. Retired FBI profilers speculated publicly about the killer's psychological traits. Some believed he was a transient predator who vanished after the murder. Others believed he lived inside Bellemere the entire time, hiding behind normalcy. Meanwhile, Pastor Daniel Reeves continued preaching every Sunday beneath stained glass windows only. Minutes away from the crime scene, he became older, slower, more fragile in appearance. People described him as compassionate and humble. He visited hospitals constantly, counseled married couples, organized food drives during harsh winters. When Emily's father died from a heart attack in 2008, Reeves personally officiated the funeral while comforting surviving family members beside the gravesite. Nobody noticed the unbearable irony standing directly in front of them. Then, in the spring of 2022, everything changed because of a genealogy website and a saliva sample mailed by a man searching for distant relatives. Detectives working cold cases across the country had begun using forensic genealogy, a controversial process combining public DNA databases with old crime scene evidence. The technique had already exposed murderers who escaped justice for decades. Bellemere investigators decided to try one final time. They sent the unidentified male DNA profile from Emily Harper's murder to specialists trained in genetic tracing. The process moved slowly at first. Tiny fragments of shared DNA connected investigators to distant cousins scattered across multiple states. Family trees expanded outward across generations. Birth records, marriage licenses, obituaries, census documents. Detectives followed bloodlines carefully like hunters tracking footprints through snow. Eventually, the list narrowed toward a single family rooted deep inside Bellemere itself. A family connected to St. Luke's Church for over 50 years. One investigator later admitted the moment felt unreal, impossible. The name emerging from the genetic trail belonged to someone the town considered sacred. Someone who had stood beside Emily's coffin while cameras rolled. Someone who comforted grieving parents and preached about evil for decades while allegedly hiding something monstrous beneath the surface. Pastor Daniel Reeves. Even veteran detectives struggled to process it. Several refused initially to believe the evidence could be accurate. Reeves was 86 years old by then, frail and partially retired. But forensic analysts remained confident. The DNA pointed directly toward his bloodline with overwhelming probability. Investigators needed confirmation before making an arrest. Quiet surveillance began almost immediately. Detectives followed Reeves discreetly while prosecutors prepared warrants behind closed doors. Nobody in Bellemere knew the truth closing in around them. Nobody suspected the town's beloved pastor was about to become the center of one of the most horrifying revelations in modern true crime history. For nearly 35 years, the man at the center of Bellemere's darkest nightmare had walked freely through grocery stores, church hallways, funerals, weddings, hospital rooms, and community gatherings with the calm confidence of someone who believed he would never be questioned. Detectives studying Pastor Daniel Reeves from inside unmarked vehicles struggled to reconcile the image in front of them with the brutality preserved in yellowed autopsy photographs. They watched an 86-year-old man move slowly across his porch with a cane, wave politely to neighbors, and spend afternoons reading scripture beside a living room window. Nothing about him resembled the monster hidden inside the case files. Yet the DNA evidence refused to bend beneath emotion. Science was dragging the investigation somewhere Bellemere never imagined possible. Investigators knew one mistake could destroy everything. If Reeves learned he was under suspicion before authorities secured a direct DNA sample, the entire operation could collapse. Prosecutors demanded absolute certainty before approving an arrest warrant against a man revered by thousands. Quietly, detectives assembled a secret task force inside the county sheriff's office. Only 6 people knew the pastor had become the primary suspect in Emily Harper's murder. Files were locked inside restricted evidence rooms. Phone calls were encrypted. Officers involved in the operation were instructed not to discuss the case even with spouses. Bellemere was too small for secrets. One careless conversation could spread through town within hours. Detectives began reconstructing every detail of Reeves's life. They uncovered decades of sermons, photographs, financial records, counseling logs, travel histories, and witness interviews buried deep inside storage archives. The deeper they looked, the stranger the picture became. Several women who attended St. Luke's Church during the late 1970s and 1980s described Reeves as charismatic but unusually controlling during private counseling sessions. One former choir member recalled feeling uncomfortable after the pastor insisted on driving her home, alone repeatedly after evening rehearsals. Another woman claimed Reeves once commented on Emily Harper's appearance in a way that felt wrong, though she dismissed it at the time because nobody questioned the pastor's intentions back then. None of the stories alone proved anything criminal. Together, they began forming a shadow around the man Bellemere trusted blindly for decades. Detectives also re-examined the original crime scene timeline and discovered troubling inconsistencies hidden inside Reeves's earliest statements. In his first interview from 1987, Reeves claimed he locked the church shortly after choir practice ended and drove home immediately. But a newly reviewed witness statement from an elderly church janitor painted a different picture. According to the janitor, he returned briefly to St. Luke's around 9:40 p.m. after forgetting his toolbox and noticed Reeves's office lights still on. He also remembered seeing a second vehicle parked near the rear entrance. Investigators somehow never followed up aggressively on the detail. At the time, the town's trust in Reeves acted like invisible armor protecting him from suspicion. Nobody wanted to believe a pastor could commit murder, especially not this pastor. Detectives interviewed surviving choir members again for the first time in years. Many were now elderly themselves. Memories had faded, details blurred with time. Yet one statement stopped investigators cold. A former choir singer named Patricia Morrow recalled seeing Emily speaking privately with Reeves near the church parking lot minutes before she disappeared. Patricia originally told police this in 1987, but the information had been buried deep inside supplemental notes never presented prominently in the investigation. According to her memory, Emily appeared nervous during the conversation. Reeves stood unusually close to her. Patricia assumed they were discussing church matters and thought nothing more about it. Now the forgotten interaction carried terrifying weight. Why had Emily stayed behind after choir practice? Why did nobody else see her leave the property? And why did Reeves insist he was alone inside the church office at the exact time another witness claimed Emily was still outside speaking with him? As investigators rebuilt the timeline, another disturbing possibility emerged. The drainage ditch where Emily's body was found sat along a route Reeves regularly used to drive home from church. The location was familiar to him. Isolated, dark, easy to access late at night without attracting attention. Detectives studying old aerial maps realized the killer likely knew the terrain intimately. A stranger passing through town would have struggled to navigate the area confidently after midnight. Someone local, however, could reach the ditch in minutes without hesitation. Someone like Daniel Reeves. Meanwhile, the pastor remained unaware the walls around him were closing slowly. Surveillance teams documented his routines carefully. Every morning, he watered flowers outside his modest white house. Every Thursday, he visited St. Luke's Church for prayer meetings. Every Sunday, he delivered shortened sermons to dwindling congregations who still adored him. Residents greeted him warmly everywhere he went. Elderly women hugged him inside supermarkets. Former altar boys shook his hand proudly. Parents introduced children to him as if standing near holiness itself. Detectives watching these interactions later admitted the psychological pressure became overwhelming. Arresting Reeves would not simply expose a murderer. It would detonate the moral foundation of an entire community. Prosecutors demanded a direct DNA comparison before moving forward publicly. Investigators needed Reeves's genetic material without alerting him. The opportunity arrived unexpectedly on a humid afternoon in June 2022. Detectives followed Reeves to a small diner just outside Belmere where he met two former church members for lunch. Surveillance officers watched from parked vehicles across the street while Reeves drank coffee, slowly beneath fluorescent lights. When the meeting ended nearly 90 minutes later, he stood carefully, thanked the waitress, and exited the diner, leaning heavily on his cane. Minutes later, an undercover officer entered the restaurant and quietly retrieved the ceramic coffee mug Reeves left behind. The cup was sealed immediately inside an evidence container and transported to the state laboratory. Overnight, detectives barely slept waiting for the results. Some still hoped the genealogy analysis had somehow misled them. Others feared the opposite. 3 days later, the confirmation arrived. DNA recovered from the coffee mug matched the biological evidence collected beneath Emily Harper's fingernails in 1987. The probability of another contributor was practically non-existent. Silence filled the sheriff's conference room after the results were read aloud. No celebration, no relief, just disbelief. One detective reportedly whispered, "Dear God," before sitting down heavily beside the evidence table. The truth felt radioactive. Belmere's beloved pastor had just become the prime suspect in one of the region's most infamous unsolved murders. Authorities moved quickly after that. Prosecutors prepared sealed arrest warrants while state investigators coordinated media containment plans. They understood the announcement would trigger chaos once the public learned who Reeves really was. Before dawn on July 18, 2022, law enforcement vehicles surrounded the pastor's property quietly beneath heavy rain. Detectives approached the front porch wearing plain clothes to avoid attracting attention from neighbors. Reeves answered the door himself, frail, pale, dressed in gray pajamas beneath a cardigan sweater. One detective later described the moment as surreal beyond words. The old pastor stared calmly at the warrant while rain hammered against the porch roof. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Reeves reportedly sighed deeply and asked a single question. After all this time, detectives informed him he was under arrest for the murder of Emily Harper. Reeves did not resist. He nodded slowly, stepped backward into the house, and requested permission to change clothes before leaving. Officers followed him carefully through narrow hallways lined with framed church photographs and handwritten thank you letters from grieving families he had counseled over decades. One detective noticed a faded choir portrait hanging near the staircase. Emily Harper stood, smiling in the second row, directly beside Reeves himself. By sunrise, the news exploded across Belmere like a bomb. Residents awoke to flashing police lights outside the pastor's home and news helicopters circling. Overhead. Within hours, every major television network in the country carried the same headline. Beloved pastor arrested in 1987 cold case murder. Shock turned instantly into denial. Church members gathered outside St. Luke's, crying openly, insisting authorities had arrested the wrong man. Some accused police of fabricating evidence. Others demanded Reeves's immediate release. Elderly residents who knew him for decades described the allegations as impossible. One woman screamed at reporters that Pastor Reeves had baptized her grandchildren and prayed beside her husband's deathbed. "That man is not a killer," she shouted repeatedly while cameras rolled. But behind the scenes, investigators were uncovering darker details hidden inside the church's history. Detectives searching Reeves's property discovered boxes containing old photographs, handwritten journals, and private counseling notes dating back to the 1970s. Several entries referenced Emily Harper directly. Some were harmless mentions connected to choir activities. Others carried a disturbing emotional intensity. In one passage written only months before Emily's murder, Reeves described feeling tempted by sinful attachment toward an unnamed young woman whose purity illuminated every room. Investigators believe the description referred to Emily. Another journal entry written shortly after the murder mentioned, "A burden too terrible for any soul to carry." Defense attorneys later argued the writings reflected spiritual struggles common among clergy members. Prosecutors saw something far more sinister. Then came the detail that shattered Bellemere's remaining illusions completely. During a forensic examination of old church storage rooms, investigators discovered evidence suggesting Reeves had secretly monitored several female choir members during the 1980s. Hidden behind insulation inside a maintenance closet, detectives recovered small boxes containing photographs of young women from the congregation, many taken without their knowledge during church events. Emily appeared repeatedly throughout the collection, smiling during choir rehearsals, standing outside church picnics, walking through parking lots unaware she was being watched. The images transformed public perception overnight. Suddenly, people began reevaluating decades of memories through a horrifying new lens. Women who once dismissed Reeves's behavior as harmless now remembered lingering touches, strange compliments, unnecessary late-night phone calls, invitations to private counseling sessions that felt subtly manipulative. Rumors spread everywhere. Former church members contacted investigators claiming Reeves possessed a darker side hidden carefully beneath his public persona. Yet despite the mounting evidence, one terrifying question remained unanswered. What exactly happened on the night Emily Harper died? Reeves refused to speak after his arrest. During interrogation sessions, he sat motionless beneath fluorescent lights, staring silently at investigators while his attorneys answered questions on his behalf. Detectives confronted him with DNA evidence, witness statements, timeline inconsistencies, and recovered journals. Reeves listened quietly without visible emotion. He never confessed, never denied the murder directly either. The silence itself became unbearable. Prosecutors believed they finally understood the motive. Emily may have rejected unwanted attention from Reeves or threatened to expose inappropriate behavior. Something escalated near the church parking lot after choir practice ended. A confrontation turned violent. Emily fought desperately. The pastor panicked. Then he abandoned her body beside the drainage ditch and returned home pretending nothing happened. But without a confession, key details remained buried forever inside Reeves's mind. Bellemere descended into emotional civil war. Some residents demanded justice for Emily after 35 years of lies. Others defended Reeves fiercely despite the evidence. St. Luke's Church lost nearly half its congregation within weeks. Prayer circles transformed into shouting matches. Families stopped speaking to each other. Elderly church members suffered panic attacks during services. The town no longer knew what was real anymore. Because if Pastor Daniel Reeves could hide something this monstrous for decades while standing at the center of their lives every Sunday morning, then what else had Bellemere failed to see lurking behind familiar smiles all along? The interrogation room smelled like stale coffee, dust, and rainwater tracked in from police boots. But Daniel Reeves sat inside it with the same eerie composure he once carried behind the pulpit at St. Luke's Church. Detectives watched him carefully through mirrored glass during hours of questioning that produced almost nothing except silence. He no longer looked like the untouchable spiritual figure from television broadcasts decades earlier. Without the church robes, without the warm smile, without worshipers surrounding him, Reeves appeared smaller now. Frail shoulders, thin hands marked by age spots, eyes hollowed by exhaustion. Yet there was still something deeply unsettling about the calmness he maintained while investigators described the final moments of Emily Harper's life in brutal detail. Most suspects reacted emotionally when confronted with crime scene photographs. Reeves barely blinked. Detectives placed enlarged forensic images across the metal table one by one. Emily's bruised wrists, the torn earring recovered from mud near the ditch, fingernail scrapings containing the DNA that ultimately exposed him after 35 years. Reeves stared quietly at each photograph before folding his hands together again. No tears, no outrage, no confusion, just silence thick enough to suffocate the room. Prosecutors believed that silence revealed guilt more loudly than any confession ever could. Outside the sheriff's office, Bellemere continued collapsing under the weight of revelation. News vans lined the streets around St. Luke's Church from sunrise until midnight while reporters interviewed devastated residents who struggled to process the impossible contradiction consuming their town. The same pastor who delivered sermons about morality, forgiveness, and salvation now stood accused of murdering a young woman who trusted him completely. National media called it one of the most shocking cold case arrests in decades. Cable news anchors replayed footage of Reeves comforting Emily's grieving mother during the 1987 funeral beside modern courtroom sketches showing him shackled beside defense attorneys. The contrast horrified viewers across the country. Investigators soon discovered the emotional damage reached far beyond Bellemere itself. Former members of St. Luke's Church began contacting authorities from multiple states after hearing about Reeves's arrest. Some simply wanted answers. Others carried stories buried for decades beneath shame and confusion. A woman living in Arizona described counseling sessions with Reeves during the early 1980s that became emotionally inappropriate. Another woman claimed Reeves once kissed her unexpectedly after evening choir practice when she was 19 years old. A third described repeated comments about her appearance that made her avoid being alone with him entirely. None accused Reeves directly of physical assault, but together the accounts painted a disturbing pattern hidden beneath his carefully cultivated public image. Detectives reopened boxes containing forgotten witness interviews from the original investigation and found more overlooked warning signs. Several church members had described Reeves as unusually attached to Emily during the months before her death. He allegedly volunteered to drive her home after rehearsals. He praised her constantly during church events. One witness recalled Reeves becoming visibly irritated whenever Emily mentioned plans to move away from Bellemere the following year to pursue graduate school. At the time, none of those observations sounded sinister. In hindsight, they felt chilling. Emily herself had apparently confided concerns to at least one friend shortly before her murder. Investigators tracked down that friend, now living in Michigan, who revealed a conversation she never fully appreciated until decades later. According to her memory, Emily admitted Reeves had begun making her uncomfortable during private discussions at church. Nothing explicit, nothing criminal, just lingering eye contact invasive questions about her relationships, subtle emotional manipulation disguised as spiritual guidance. Emily reportedly planned to distance herself from the church choir gradually because she no longer trusted being alone with him. The statement transformed the case dramatically. Prosecutors now believed they understood the emotional tension building before the murder. Reeves may have sensed Emily pulling away. He may have feared exposure. And on the night of October 13th, 1987, something finally snapped. Yet despite mounting evidence, the defense launched an aggressive counterattack almost immediately. Reeves's attorneys portrayed him as a fragile elderly man targeted unfairly by modern forensic obsession and media hysteria. They argued the DNA evidence merely proved physical contact occurred at some point, not murder itself. Reeves had known Emily closely through church activities for years, shared objects, handshakes, hugs, choir materials. According to the defense, contamination or innocent transfer could explain the genetic evidence beneath her fingernails. Prosecutors called the argument desperate nonsense. Forensic experts testified the biological material strongly indicated violent struggle, not casual interaction. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered another devastating detail hidden inside archived evidence. Photographs from the original crime scene. During a re-examination of Emily's clothing using modern imaging technology, analysts identified faint fiber traces consistent with upholstery material from a 1985 Buick Electra, the exact vehicle Reeves drove in 1987. Detectives located maintenance records proving Reeves owned the car at the time of the murder, though the vehicle itself had long since been destroyed decades earlier. The discovery intensified public outrage. Belmere residents who once defended Reeves began withdrawing support quietly. Attendance at St. Luke's collapsed further. Parish donations vanished. Several elderly church members reportedly suffered nervous breakdowns after realizing the man, guiding their spiritual lives, may have hidden homicidal impulses the entire time. One former choir singer told reporters she stopped sleeping entirely after the arrest because she kept remembering rides home alone with Reeves during winter rehearsals years earlier. "I trusted him more than my own father," she whispered through tears during a televised interview. "That's the part destroying people here. We trusted him completely." The psychological devastation spread through Belmere like poison. Families argued constantly over whether Reeves deserved sympathy because of his age or condemnation, because of his alleged crimes. Some residents removed St. Luke's bumper stickers from vehicles overnight. Others refused to believe the evidence, no matter how overwhelming it became. Small-town diners transformed into battlegrounds filled with whispered accusations and bitter debates. Elderly couples stopped attending church entirely after spending decades inside its walls every Sunday. The collapse of trust felt total. Detectives privately admitted they had never witnessed a community unravel emotionally with such intensity. Then prosecutors made another shocking announcement. During forensic analysis of evidence recovered from Reeves's home, investigators discovered traces of old blood on a leather-bound Bible stored inside a sealed attic container. Advanced testing revealed the blood belonged to Emily Harper. The discovery stunned even veteran detectives. According to prosecutors, the Bible likely sat untouched for decades, hidden among boxes of old church documents and personal memorabilia. How Emily's blood ended up on the object remained unclear. Defense attorneys argued contamination again. Prosecutors believed the Bible may have been present during the attack itself or handled afterward, while Reeves cleaned evidence. Either possibility felt horrifying beyond comprehension. News of the blood evidence detonated across national headlines instantly. Belmere residents gathered outside St. Luke's Church holding candles while television crews filmed emotional confrontations between devastated former parishioners and reporters demanding reactions. One elderly man collapsed crying on the church steps after hearing the update broadcast live through a nearby radio. "He baptized my children," the man kept repeating while paramedics treated him beside camera flashes. "He buried my wife." Inside county jail, however, Daniel Reeves remained almost unnervingly detached from the chaos consuming the outside world. Guard described him as polite, quiet, and strangely serene. He spent most of his time reading scripture or staring silently through the small window inside his cell. Other inmates reportedly avoided him after learning his identity. Several correctional officers later admitted Reeves's calmness disturbed them deeply. Murder suspects usually expressed fear, anger, denial, or desperation. Reeves projected none of those emotions. It was as though he accepted the collapse of his double life long before the arrest ever happened. Detectives made one final attempt to break his silence by confronting him with Emily surviving family members. Her younger brother, Thomas Harper, agreed reluctantly to participate in a monitored meeting arranged through prosecutors. Thomas had been only 17 years old when Emily died. Now in his 50s, years of unresolved grief lined his face permanently. Investigators hoped emotional confrontation might finally trigger a confession. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. Reeves entered the visitation room slowly, wearing an orange jail uniform, while Thomas sat waiting across the table, trembling with barely controlled rage. Surveillance footage later, described by court officials, captured several agonizing moments of silence before Thomas finally spoke. "Why her?" he asked quietly. Reeves looked at him for several seconds without answering. Thomas repeated the question louder this time, tears forming in his eyes. "Why did you take my sister?" Reeves lowered his gaze toward the table and whispered something almost inaudible. Investigators reviewing the recording enhanced the audio repeatedly afterward. The words chilled everyone who heard them. "I loved her." Thomas erupted instantly, screaming curses while officers rushed into the room to restrain him. Reeves never elaborated further, but the statement transformed public perception again. Prosecutors believed the pastor's obsession with Emily had fueled the entire tragedy. Defense attorneys argued the phrase merely reflected spiritual affection twisted unfairly by grief and media sensationalism. Belmere itself no longer knew what to believe emotionally, only that the nightmare surrounding Emily Harper's death had become even darker than anyone imagined. Then another terrifying possibility surfaced unexpectedly. Detectives reviewing unsolved disappearances across neighboring counties identified similarities between Emily's case and two earlier incidents involving young women connected loosely to churches. Reeves previously visited during regional ministry work in the 1970s. Both women vanished under mysterious circumstances years before Emily's murder. Neither body was ever found. The timeline overlap frightened investigators enough to launch quiet inquiries into Reeves's movements during those periods. Had Emily Harper truly been his first victim, or merely the only one whose body was recovered with enough surviving evidence to expose him decades later? Rumors exploded immediately once news leaked to the media. Former parishioners began wondering whether St. Luke's Church had unknowingly sheltered something far more dangerous than a single murderer. Internet forums filled with speculation about additional victims hidden somewhere beneath decades of secrecy and silence. Detectives cautioned publicly that no evidence directly linked Reeves to the older disappearances. Privately, many feared the opposite. Because if a respected pastor could conceal one brutal homicide behind sermons and smiles for 35 years, how many other secrets might still remain buried beneath the surface of Belmere's haunted history? By the autumn of 2022, Belmere no longer resembled the quiet Midwestern town people once trusted blindly. The streets felt heavier now, poisoned by suspicion and grief that refused to settle. Every familiar face carried uncertainty behind the eyes. Every church bell sounded wrong. St. Luke's still stood at the center of town beneath its tall white steeple. But the building had transformed into something ghost-like. Half-empty pews, locked side entrances, security cameras mounted above doors that once remained open day and night. The stained glass windows that used to glow warmly across Main Street now felt like reminders of betrayal. Reporters continued circling Belmere daily, chasing rumors that grew darker each week. Because the deeper investigators dug into Daniel Reeves's past, the more disturbing the story became. Prosecutors quietly assembled evidence for trial, while forensic teams searched through decades of archived material connected to the church. Detectives spent weeks inside dusty storage units, abandoned filing rooms, and forgotten maintenance closets hidden beneath St. Luke's. What they found painted a portrait of obsession far more terrifying than anyone expected. Among Reeves's belongings, investigators recovered handwritten sermon drafts containing strange coded references to temptation, purification, and sinful desire. Some entries mentioned unnamed women repeatedly. Others described emotional struggles that sounded less like spiritual conflict and more like predatory fixation. One notebook entry dated only weeks before Emily Harper's murder chilled detectives completely. She resists guidance now. Reeves had written carefully in blue ink. God sees my suffering. He sees how she tests my resolve. Prosecutors believed the unnamed she referred directly to Emily. Defense attorneys argued the journals reflected abstract religious metaphors taken wildly out of context. But another discovery proved harder to explain away. Hidden inside a locked cabinet beneath Reeves's former church office, investigators uncovered dozens of cassette tapes labeled with dates stretching across nearly 20 years. Many contained recorded counseling sessions between Reeves and female church members who apparently never knew their conversations were being preserved secretly. Detectives listened in horror as young women discussed marriages, insecurities, relationships, fears, and deeply personal struggles, while Reeves guided the conversations calmly from behind his pastor persona. Some recordings felt normal. Others crossed unsettling emotional boundaries. Reeves frequently redirected discussions towards sexuality, obedience, temptation, and loyalty in ways modern investigators described as manipulative and psychologically invasive. Then they found Emily Harper's tapes, 3 separate recordings. The final session dated less than 2 weeks before her murder. Forensic audio specialists enhanced the deteriorated cassette carefully while prosecutors listened. From inside the evidence lab, Emily sounded nervous throughout the conversation. Reeves's voice remained soft, controlled, almost hypnotic. At one point, he asked whether she had been avoiding him intentionally. Emily laughed awkwardly before denying it. Reeves pressed further. The tension in the recording became impossible to ignore. "You belong here, Emily," he told her quietly. "This church needs your devotion." Emily responded politely but firmly that she planned to apply for graduate programs outside Belmere. The following year, several seconds of silence followed. Then Reeves spoke again, lower this time. "Sometimes people abandon the path God chooses for them." Prosecutors believe the tape revealed emotional possessiveness escalating dangerously beneath the surface. The public reaction after details leaked to the media was immediate and explosive. Former church members flooded online forums, sharing uncomfortable memories about Reeves that suddenly felt sinister in hindsight. Women recalled private meetings that lasted too long, lingering touches during prayer circles, late-night phone calls disguised as spiritual guidance. Young choir members remembered feeling strangely uneasy around him, but dismissing the discomfort. Because he was the pastor. Belmere's trust in religious authority had blinded people for decades. Now every memory felt contaminated. Investigators reopened dozens of old complaints and rumors previously ignored by church leadership. Over the years, one former secretary admitted she once discovered photographs of young female parishioners inside Reeves's desk drawer during the late 1980s, but convinced herself there must be an innocent explanation. Another church employee claimed Reeves occasionally became furious when women distanced themselves from church activities unexpectedly. Detectives began suspecting Emily Harper's desire to leave Belmere may have triggered something violent inside him. Yet despite the avalanche of circumstantial evidence, Reeves himself continued refusing to explain what happened on the night of October 13th, 1987. During court appearances, he sat motionless beside his attorneys while cameras flashed relentlessly around him. He never looked toward Emily's surviving family, never addressed reporters, never denied loving her either. The silence fueled endless speculation. Some criminal profilers studying the case publicly theorized Reeves suffered from pathological narcissism hidden beneath religious devotion. Others believed he compartmentalized his life so completely that he convinced himself his actions existed outside ordinary morality. Prosecutors focused instead on building a timeline strong enough to survive trial. According to their reconstruction, choir practice ended around 9:15 p.m. Most members left quickly afterward. Emily remained behind briefly near the church parking lot, where Patricia Morrow saw her speaking privately with Reeves. Investigators believed Reeves persuaded Emily to continue the conversation inside the church under the pretense of spiritual counseling or discussing choir matters. Something happened during that meeting. Perhaps Reeves confessed inappropriate feelings. Perhaps Emily threatened to expose his behavior. Perhaps she simply rejected him directly for the first time. Whatever occurred triggered violence rapidly. Forensic evidence suggested Emily fought with extraordinary desperation. Scratches recovered from Reeves's preserved medical records during later examinations indicated unexplained injuries along his forearms shortly after the murder. At the time, he claimed they came from yard work. Prosecutors believed Emily caused them while trying to survive. Investigators theorized Reeves transported her body to the drainage ditch using his Buick shortly before midnight, then returned home and resumed normal life before sunrise. The horrifying simplicity of the sequence haunted detectives deeply. One violent outburst, hidden successfully behind decades of sermons and public admiration. But then the investigation took another shocking turn. During analysis of old financial records connected to St. Luke's Church, forensic accountants uncovered evidence Reeves secretly paid thousands of dollars over the years to a retired sheriff's deputy named Harold Pike, one of the original officers involved in Emily Harper's murder investigation back in 1987. The payments stretched across nearly 15 years. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers disguised as church consulting fees. Investigators immediately reopened Pike's role in the original case. By then, the former deputy lived alone in declining health inside a trailer, nearly 2 counties away. Detectives arrived unannounced one rainy evening, hoping to question him quietly before the story leaked publicly. What they found terrified them. Pike appeared visibly shaken the moment Reeves's name surfaced, according to interview transcripts later obtained by reporters. The former deputy initially denied wrongdoing repeatedly before breaking down emotionally after nearly 3 hours of questioning. Through tears and fragmented statements, Pike admitted Reeves approached him privately only days after Emily's murder, claiming the town could not survive scandal involving the church. Pike insisted Reeves never confessed directly, but the pastor allegedly pressured him to protect Belmere from destruction. Investigators believe Pike deliberately minimized suspicious evidence connected to Reeves during the early investigation, including witness statements placing Emily near the pastor shortly before her disappearance. Pike denied participating knowingly in a cover-up of murder. Prosecutors were unconvinced. News of possible police corruption detonated across national media instantly. Bellemere's nightmare grew even darker overnight. Now residents faced the possibility that Emily Harper's killer not only escaped justice for decades, but may have received protection from law enforcement desperate to preserve the town's image. Protesters gathered outside the sheriff's office demanding accountability. Elderly residents who once defended Reeves publicly stopped speaking to reporters altogether. St. Luke's Church canceled services indefinitely after receiving threatening letters and vandalism. Attacks during the night. Someone spray-painted a single sentence across the church entrance in dripping red paint. "We trusted you." Detectives, meanwhile, expanded their investigation into the two older disappearances tentatively linked to Reeves. One involved 19-year-old Rebecca Nolan, a church volunteer who vanished in Missouri during 1974 after attending a regional youth ministry conference where Reeves preached as a guest speaker. The second involved 21-year-old Lydia Grant, last seen leaving an evening Bible study in Kansas during 1979 after reportedly receiving counseling from Reeves shortly before disappearing. Both women resembled Emily physically. Blonde hair, young, active in church communities. Neither case had ever been solved. Prosecutors stopped short of accusing Reeves publicly in either disappearance. But investigators traveled across multiple states reviewing archived evidence, desperately searching for forensic links before Reeves's health deteriorated further. Because there was another problem now looming over the entire case. Daniel Reeves was dying. Jail medical staff confirmed his condition worsened rapidly during the months following his arrest. Congestive heart failure, advanced kidney disease, severe hypertension. Prosecutors feared he might never survive long enough to stand trial fully. Emily Harper's family panicked at the possibility. After 35 years waiting for answers, they faced losing the only man who truly knew what happened without ever hearing him admit the truth publicly. Thomas Harper began attending every court hearing obsessively, staring silently at Reeves with visible hatred burning across his face. Several reporters described the tension between them as unbearable. During one hearing, Thomas reportedly whispered, "You don't get to die a pastor," while deputies escorted Reeves past him in chains. Still, Reeves remained silent. Until one freezing December night when the sheriff's office received an unexpected phone call from county jail shortly after midnight. Reeves wanted to speak privately with investigators. Alone, no attorneys present. Detectives rushed through snow-covered roads toward the jail, believing the confession they chased for months might finally be coming. They found Reeves sitting weakly inside the medical wing, wrapped in blankets beneath fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead. His breathing sounded shallow now, fragile. The old pastor stared at the detectives for a long moment before speaking quietly. "There are things buried that should never be found," he whispered. Investigators exchanged uneasy glances immediately. Reeves continued staring toward the floor. Some sins spread when exposed. Detectives demanded clarification. Reeves looked up slowly, eyes hollow and exhausted. Then he said something that froze the entire room. "Emily wasn't the first one afraid of me." The room fell completely silent after Daniel Reeves whispered those words. Even the humming fluorescent lights above the jail infirmary suddenly seemed louder. Detectives stared at the old pastor across the metal table, trying to determine whether they had just heard the beginning of a confession or the calculated manipulation of a man who spent his entire life controlling emotions from behind a pulpit. Reeves sat motionless beneath the thin blanket wrapped around his shoulders. his pale hands trembling slightly from age and illness. Outside the narrow, reinforced window, snow drifted through darkness over Belmere while the town slept unaware that its most terrifying secrets might finally be surfacing after decades underground. Detective Alan Dwyer leaned forward carefully and asked the obvious question. "Who else was afraid of you, Daniel?" Reeves lowered his gaze again. Several long seconds passed before he answered. "Women who understood too much." The response sent a chill through the room immediately. Detectives exchanged quick glances, but allowed him to continue speaking uninterrupted. They knew suspects at the edge of confession often retreated instantly, if pressured too aggressively. Reeves swallowed hard and rubbed his frail fingers together slowly, as though trying to warm himself from some invisible cold. "People think evil arrives looking monstrous," he murmured. "But it doesn't. Evil survives because it learns how to look trustworthy." Investigators demanded specifics. Reeves refused. Every answer emerged fragmented, wrapped in cryptic language and religious metaphors that blurred the line between admission and evasion. He described temptation, rage, weakness, and moments where God turned away, but stopped short of confessing directly to Emily Harper's murder. Then he mentioned a location, an abandoned property nearly 15 miles outside Belmere, near the remains of an old farming settlement swallowed gradually by forest over the years. Reeves claimed the place contained things connected to suffering. Detectives pressed harder immediately. Was there evidence there? Bodies? Personal belongings? Reeves closed his eyes and whispered, "You should have looked there long ago." Within hours, state police assembled a search team despite the brutal winter weather. Snowplows cleared narrow backroads before dawn, while investigators guided cadaver dogs and forensic units toward the abandoned farmland Reeves referenced during the interview. The property itself looked forgotten by time. A collapsed farmhouse, rusted fencing disappearing beneath snowdrifts, dead trees twisting against the gray sky like skeletal fingers. Detectives searching the area initially found nothing except debris and rotting machinery buried beneath decades of neglect. Then one of the cadaver dogs alerted near the remains of an old well hidden behind dense overgrowth. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Forensic teams worked carefully for hours through freezing temperatures while news helicopters circled overhead after police scanners leaked word of the operation. By sunset, investigators uncovered human remains buried several feet underground beside the well. The body appeared female, young, severely decomposed. Detectives standing at the scene later described the moment as emotionally devastating. Nobody spoke for several seconds after the first bone fragments emerged from frozen earth. They all understood the horrifying implication immediately. If the remains belonged to one of the missing women linked loosely to Reeves, Belmere's nightmare had just become exponentially darker. News of the discovery exploded nationally before forensic identification even began. Reporters flooded the town again. Cable networks interrupted regular programming with breaking updates. Former members of St. Luke's Church gathered outside police barricades, crying openly while detectives transported evidence containers from the scene beneath camera flashes. Social media transformed into chaos overnight. Some users accused authorities of hiding serial murders connected to Reeves for decades. Others claimed Belmere itself was cursed. The town's name became synonymous with betrayal and hidden evil across the country. Meanwhile, investigators returned to the jail, determined to push Reeves further while momentum remained on their side. But the pastor had retreated emotionally once again. He refused additional questioning, refused meals, refused eye contact. Guards reported he spent hours alone mumbling prayers beneath his breath inside the medical wing. Detectives feared they were losing him psychologically before securing a full confession. Then forensic anthropologists delivered the first shocking update regarding the remains from the well. The victim was not Rebecca Nolan or Lydia Grant, the two women previously linked to Reeves through old disappearances. Instead, dental records identified the body as Claire Bennett, an 18-year-old Belmere resident who vanished briefly during the summer of 1978 before mysteriously reappearing nearly 3 weeks later. At the time, Claire claimed she had run away voluntarily after arguing with family members. She refused to explain where she had been. The town eventually forgot the incident completely. Until now, because according to official records, Claire Bennett was supposed to be alive. Detectives raced to locate her immediately. What they discovered deepened the horror surrounding Reeves beyond anything Belmere imagined possible. Claire Bennett had died officially in 1994 following a reported overdose in another state under a different surname. Investigators reviewing old documents uncovered a trail of inconsistencies suggesting she spent years drifting between shelters, temporary jobs, psychiatric treatment centers, and abusive relationships after leaving Belmere permanently. Interviews with surviving acquaintances painted a tragic portrait of severe trauma, paranoia, substance dependency, and recurring nightmares connected to religion and churches. Several witnesses recalled Claire becoming hysterical whenever pastors or clergy members approached her unexpectedly. One former roommate described waking repeatedly to hear Claire screaming in her sleep about the room beneath the church. Detectives reopened her entire history immediately. The remains discovered near the abandoned farm, however, complicated everything. If Claire died officially in 1994, whose body had investigators just recovered? Forensic teams worked non-stop comparing records, bone structure, and DNA profiles. Then came another revelation that stunned authorities completely. The remains belonged not to Claire Bennett herself, but to her younger sister, Sarah Bennett, a 14-year-old girl who vanished in 1978, only days before Claire disappeared temporarily. Belmere barely remembered Sarah's case because Reeves personally helped frame the narrative that she likely drowned accidentally while wandering near a river outside town. No body was ever found. Until now, detectives suddenly realized the timeline fit together with terrifying precision. Sarah vanished first. Claire disappeared shortly afterward for nearly 3 weeks. When she returned, she refused to discuss anything that happened. Investigators now believe Claire knew exactly what happened to her sister and spent the rest of her life psychologically destroyed by the secret. Prosecutors theorized Reeves abducted Sarah under circumstances still unclear, murdered her, then manipulated or threatened Claire into silence afterward. The implications were monstrous. Belmere's beloved pastor was no longer suspected of a single crime of passion. Investigators now faced the possibility of a serial predator hiding behind religious authority for decades. Detectives reopened every unexplained disappearance connected to Belmere and St. Luke's Church, dating back to the early 1970s. Old evidence rooms filled rapidly with boxes coated in dust and forgotten paperwork. Families who spent years believing lost loved ones simply ran away suddenly found themselves confronting unbearable new possibilities. Reporters interviewed aging residents who recalled strange rumors surrounding Reeves stretching back decades. Young women warned privately never to meet him alone after evening services. Parents uncomfortable with his attention toward teenage choir members. Stories dismissed repeatedly because no one wanted to challenge the pastor publicly. The psychological collapse inside Belmere intensified beyond repair. Several church members who defended Reeves initially suffered complete emotional breakdowns after news of Sarah Bennett's remains became public. One elderly woman reportedly tore down every religious image inside her home after realizing Reeves' counseled her family for 40 years while allegedly carrying secrets involving murdered girls. Another former parishioner attempted suicide after admitting she ignored uncomfortable behavior from Reeves during the 1980s because she feared questioning him would make her appear sinful. Guilt spread through the community like infection. Everyone wondered whether warning signs had always existed in plain sight. Detectives investigating St. Luke's Church itself then uncovered architectural blueprints, revealing a hidden basement storage area beneath the oldest section of the building, a space rarely mentioned in modern church records. According to retired maintenance workers, Reeves possessed the only key for years. Prosecutors immediately secured warrants and sealed off the church completely while forensic teams prepared another exhaustive search. Belmere residents watched in stunned silence as investigators entered the church carrying ground-penetrating radar equipment and evidence containers beneath armed police supervision. Hours later, workers emerged carrying several sealed boxes recovered from inside the concealed basement room. Authorities refused to describe the contents publicly. Rumors exploded instantly anyway. Some claimed investigators found personal belongings belonging to missing women. Others whispered about photographs, journals, and videotapes documenting years of abuse hidden directly beneath the sanctuary where families worshipped every Sunday. The truth proved horrifying enough on its own. Inside the basement storage area, investigators recovered dozens of items connected to female church members dating back nearly 25 years. Jewelry, hair ribbons, choir photographs, handwritten letters, personal diary pages. Several objects belonged to women never officially reported missing, but who later described Reeves as emotionally manipulative or frightening during their youth. Emily Harper's missing necklace was discovered among the collection, wrapped carefully inside cloth, beside a church hymnal. For detectives, the find shattered any remaining doubt completely. Reeves had kept trophies, souvenirs, reminders. The profile emerging now resembled organized serial offenders investigators studied for decades. But the greatest shock arrived just before Christmas when forensic analysts completed examination of biological evidence recovered from the hidden church basement. Multiple unidentified DNA profiles belonging to young women were discovered throughout the room. Some matched living former parishioners. Others matched nobody. Investigators could not yet determine whether the evidence reflected abuse, assault, consensual encounters, or contamination accumulated across decades. But one conclusion became unavoidable. St. Luke's Church had concealed far more darkness beneath its walls than anyone ever imagined. And somewhere inside county jail, weakened by illness but still alive, Daniel Reeves remained the only person capable of explaining how deep the horror truly went. Christmas arrived in Belmere beneath freezing rain and silence. The streets that once glowed with choir music and holiday decorations now felt hollow, almost abandoned. St. Luke's Church remained sealed behind police tape while forensic lights burned through stained glass windows late into the night. Residents avoided driving past the building whenever possible. Some crossed themselves instinctively at the sight of it. Others looked away completely, unable to reconcile the church they trusted with a nightmare unfolding inside its walls. Every day brought another headline, another leak, another revelation connected to Daniel Reeves and the hidden basement beneath St. Luke's. National reporters called it the pastor's vault. Online forums compare the case to America's most infamous serial predator investigations. Detectives hated the media circus surrounding Belmere, but privately many admitted the comparison no longer felt exaggerated. The evidence recovered from the concealed basement room disturbed even veteran investigators. Hardened by years of homicide work, prosecutors spent days cataloging the contents while forensic analysts examined every object, individually beneath laboratory lights. Some items appeared harmless in isolation. Photographs from church picnics, choir rosters, old letters from parishioners. Others felt deeply sinister. Locks of hair wrapped carefully in tissue paper. Young women's jewelry stored inside labeled envelopes. Dozens of candid photographs taken without subjects' knowledge from hidden angles around church property. Several images showed women entering counseling rooms alone, while Reeves apparently watched from a distance. Emily Harper appeared repeatedly throughout the collection, smiling during choir rehearsals, carrying in books through church hallways, standing beside friends completely unaware someone was documenting her movements obsessively. Detectives studying the photographs described a growing feeling of nausea as patterns emerged. Reeves appeared fixated on young women who embodied innocence, devotion, and vulnerability within the church community. The hidden collection transformed prosecutors' understanding of the case entirely. Emily's murder no longer looked like an isolated eruption of violence. It looked like the culmination of years of escalating obsession hidden behind religious authority. Meanwhile, inside county jail, Daniel Reeves's physical condition continued deteriorating rapidly. Medical staff transferred him permanently into the infirmary wing after repeated episodes of chest pain and respiratory distress. Guards described him as increasingly withdrawn. He rarely spoke now except during prayer. He stopped reading newspapers after headlines about the hidden basement spread nationally. Several correctional officers reported hearing him crying quietly during the night, though none could determine whether the tears reflected guilt, fear, or self-pity. Prosecutors feared time was running out. Without a formal confession, major portions of the investigation remained built on circumstantial reconstruction. They needed Reeves to speak before illness silenced him forever. Then, on December 28th, investigators received another terrifying development from forensic analysts working the unidentified DNA recovered inside the church basement. One of the unknown profiles matched evidence collected from a separate unsolved case in Indiana, involving the disappearance of a 19-year-old church volunteer named Angela Price in 1983. Angela vanished after attending a regional youth ministry conference where Daniel Reeves delivered guest sermons over a 3-day weekend. Her body was never found. At the time, investigators believed she likely left voluntarily with a boyfriend. Now the DNA link shattered that assumption completely. Detectives traveled immediately to Indiana, reopening Angela's case with fresh urgency. Interviews with surviving witnesses uncovered eerie similarities to Emily Harper's situation. Angela reportedly admired Reeves deeply before her disappearance. Friends describe her becoming emotionally dependent on his spiritual guidance during the conference. One witness recalled seeing Angela arguing privately with Reeves near the church parking lot hours, before she vanished forever. Another remembered Reeves appearing unusually agitated during his final sermon that weekend. Investigators suddenly faced a horrifying possibility. Reeves may have operated across multiple states for years, using religious events and ministry work to identify vulnerable young women while hiding behind unquestioned moral authority. Belmere's nightmare was growing larger than anyone imagined. Federal authorities quietly joined the investigation soon afterward. Behavioral analysts from the FBI reviewed evidence collected from St. Luke's Church alongside decades of Reeves's travel history and ministry records. Their internal assessment reportedly concluded that Reeves exhibited patterns consistent with organized predatory behavior concealed beneath positions of institutional trust. The language alone terrified local investigators. Belmere residents reacted even more violently once rumors of possible federal involvement leaked. Publicly, protesters gathered outside the courthouse, carrying photographs of missing women connected loosely to churches Reeves visited over the years. Former parishioners demanded St. Luke's be demolished entirely. Others insisted the church itself remained sacred despite the evil allegedly hidden inside it. Families stopped speaking over the arguments. Lifelong friendships collapsed. Belmere had become a community at war with its own memories. The emotional destruction spread especially hard among elderly residents who devoted their lives to Reeves's ministry. Many refused to accept the growing evidence, even after the hidden basement discoveries. Others accepted it too completely and spiraled into despair. One retired schoolteacher who attended St. Luke's for 40 years reportedly burned every sermon. Cassette Reeves ever recorded in her backyard before suffering a stroke days later. Another parishioner disappeared briefly during the holidays after telling relatives he couldn't. Live inside a town built on lies. Detectives privately admitted the case felt less like solving a murder and more like uncovering a psychological disaster buried beneath decades of silence. Then came a phone call that changed everything again. Shortly after New Year's Day, jail officials contacted prosecutors urgently around 2 a.m. Daniel Reeves was asking for Detective Alan Dwyer specifically. Alone. No lawyers. No recording equipment visible inside the room. Dwyer arrived at the infirmary less than 30 minutes later beneath heavy snowfall. He found Reeves sitting upright in bed attached to oxygen tubing. His skin pale beneath dim fluorescent lights. The old pastor looked exhausted beyond words now. Fragile. Haunted. But there was also something else in his expression that night. Fear. Real fear. Reeves motioned weakly for Dwyer to sit beside the bed. For several moments, neither man spoke. Snow tapped softly against the narrow window, while medical machines beeped quietly nearby. Finally, Reeves whispered, "They think Emily was the worst thing I ever did." Detective Dwyer remained silent, allowing the pastor to continue. Reeves stared toward the ceiling with glassy eyes. "Emily fought," he murmured. "She saw what I really was." Dwyer felt his pulse quicken instantly. It was the closest thing to an admission Reeves had ever given. The detective asked directly whether he killed her. Reeves closed his eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." The words hung inside the room like poison. Dwyer pressed harder immediately. Reeves described the night of October 13th. 1987 in fragmented whispers interrupted constantly by coughing fits and long silences. According to his account, Emily confronted him after choir practice about rumors involving inappropriate behavior toward younger female church members. She threatened to leave St. Luke's permanently and tell others what she suspected. Reeves claimed panic overwhelmed him. He begged her to stay quiet. Emily tried walking away toward the parking lot. Reeves followed her. An argument escalated near the rear church entrance. Then violence erupted suddenly. Reeves admitted grabbing Emily physically when she threatened to contact police. He claimed she fought back, harder than expected. At one point, he whispered something detectives would never forget. "Her eyes changed," he said weakly. "She looked at me like she could already see hell waiting." Reeves described striking Emily accidentally during the struggle before dragging her toward his vehicle in panic. He insisted repeatedly that he never planned to kill her. Prosecutors later argued the claim was meaningless beside the brutality of the crime scene itself. But Reeves still refused to provide full details about what happened afterward near the drainage ditch. Whenever Dwyer pushed further, the pastor retreated emotionally again. Then the conversation turned darker. Reeves began discussing Sarah Bennett, the missing 14-year-old whose remains investigators discovered near the abandoned well. According to Reeves, Sarah stumbled accidentally upon private counseling materials hidden inside St. Luke's during the summer of 1978. Detectives believed he meant the secret photographs and recordings later recovered from the concealed basement. Reeves claimed Sarah threatened to tell adults what she found. She was too young to understand, he whispered. Too loud. Too curious. Dwyer asked directly whether Reeves murdered her. The old pastor stared silently at the detective for nearly 20 seconds before answering. Some mistakes spread if they survive. It was not a confession, but it was close enough to make Dwyer's stomach turn. Then Reeves mentioned another name investigators had never heard before. Hannah Mercer, 20 years old, choir volunteer. Disappeared briefly during 1981 before leaving Belmere permanently. Reeves described her as disobedient and dangerously emotional. Detectives immediately reopened old records, searching for any trace of Hannah Mercer's history. What they found terrified them again. Hannah had indeed left Belmere suddenly after a documented emotional breakdown connected to church. Counseling sessions with Reeves. She later spent years institutionalized in psychiatric facilities before dying in 1999. Medical records contained repeated references to severe religious trauma and recurring claims about hidden rooms under the church. Nobody believed her at the time. Suddenly, every accusation sounded horrifyingly plausible. Detective Dwyer realized something devastating during the interview. Reeves might never provide a clean confession because he no longer viewed his crimes through ordinary morality. He interpreted everything through distorted spiritual language, rationalization, and self-preservation layered over decades. The pastor spoke about violence the same way he once spoke about sin from the pulpit, carefully, symbolically, almost poetically. Yet beneath the religious metaphors, the truth emerged piece by piece. Women who threatened his control frightened him. Women who resisted him triggered rage. Women who discovered his secrets became dangerous. Before ending the interview, Dwyer asked the question haunting investigators most. How many were there? Reeves looked genuinely confused for a moment, then deeply tired. He turned slowly toward the dark window where snow continued falling beyond the glass. More than God ever forgave, he whispered. Detective Alan Dwyer walked out of the county jail just before dawn with snow crunching beneath his boots and the pastor's final words echoing endlessly inside his head. More than God ever forgave. The statement spread through the investigation team within hours. Though nobody could fully determine whether Reeves referred to murders, assaults, manipulation, or sins buried entirely inside his own mind. The ambiguity made it worse. Every detective involved in the case suddenly feared they were no longer investigating a single homicide, but the hidden history of a predator who spent decades cloaked in religious authority while vulnerable women disappeared emotionally, psychologically, and possibly physically around him. Belmere woke that morning beneath gray skies and fresh panic. Rumors about Reeves's late-night interview leaked almost immediately despite prosecutors' ordering strict secrecy. Reporters surrounded the sheriff's office before sunrise, demanding confirmation that the pastor confessed to multiple crimes. Authorities refused comment publicly, but the damage was already done. Residents gathered outside diners and gas stations whispering about hidden victims, secret graves, and missing girls nobody bothered searching for decades earlier because Daniel Reeves always provided reassuring explanations. The town's collective memory itself had become contaminated. Every disappearance, every runaway teenager, every nervous church volunteer who left Belmere suddenly now carried terrifying new implications. Investigators formed a special review unit dedicated entirely to re-examining women connected to St. Luke's Church between 1970 and 1990. Old filing cabinets were emptied, yearbooks analyzed, choir rosters digitized. Detectives created timelines stretching across decades, trying to identify patterns hidden beneath ordinary church life. What emerged disturbed them profoundly. Multiple young women who spent time under Reeves's counseling later suffered breakdowns. Substance abuse issues, abrupt relocations, or unexplained disappearances. Most survived physically. Many did not survive emotionally. Prosecutors began describing Reeves privately as a psychological serial offender whose violence escalated over years beneath the protection of faith and community trust. Then investigators uncovered evidence suggesting Reeves may not have acted entirely alone. During analysis of church financial records and archive correspondence, detectives found repeated references to private meetings between Reeves and former Deputy Harold Pike during critical moments connected to missing persons investigations. Pike, already under scrutiny for allegedly minimizing evidence in Emily Harper's murder case, suddenly appeared tied more deeply to the church's hidden secrets than authorities first realized. Detectives obtained warrants and searched Pike's trailer again thoroughly. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in a bedroom closet, they discovered boxes containing decades-old police reports, personal journals, and several unregistered cassette tapes. One tape changed the investigation immediately. The recording appeared damaged and incomplete, but forensic audio specialists enhanced portions successfully enough to identify two voices. One belonged unmistakably to Daniel Reeves. The other matched Harold Pike. The conversation itself sounded fragmented, tense, almost panicked. Reeves spoke first. "If she talks, everything collapses." Pike responded quietly, "Then you should have controlled her before it got this far." Detectives listening to the tape reportedly felt physically sick. The date scribbled on the cassette label matched October 1987, only days after Emily Harper's murder. Prosecutors now believe Pike may have known far more about the crime than he ever admitted publicly. Investigators brought the former deputy in for another interrogation immediately. This time Pike looked terrified before questioning even began. His health had deteriorated badly since the initial interview weeks earlier. Pale skin, shaking hands, slurred speech from heavy drinking. Detectives confronted him with the tape recording directly. Pike broke almost instantly, through tears and visible panic. He admitted Reeves contacted him privately after Emily's body was discovered and begged for protection. According to Pike, Reeves never confessed outright, but implied something terrible happened during a confrontation with Emily outside the church. Pike claimed he convinced himself Reeves acted accidentally in a moment of panic. "I thought I was saving the town," he whispered repeatedly during interrogation. Detectives asked whether Pike helped destroy evidence. At first he denied it. Then prosecutors revealed forensic analysis proving portions of the original evidence files had been altered deliberately. Pike collapsed emotionally. He admitted removing witness statements implicating Reeves and discouraging investigators from pursuing leads connected to St. Luke's Church aggressively. But the most horrifying revelation came near the end of the interview. Pike claimed Reeves confessed privately years earlier to hurting another girl before Emily, a younger one. Detectives immediately suspected Sarah Bennett. Pike insisted he never learned the full details because he didn't want to know. He described Reeves as emotionally unstable during the confession, terrified that old secrets would surface if Emily exposed his behavior publicly. According to Pike, Reeves believed Sarah Bennett's disappearance represented God testing his soul. The language chilled investigators completely. Belmere exploded once Pike's cooperation leaked publicly. Citizens who once defended local law enforcement now accused the sheriff's department itself of helping bury murder for decades. Protesters surrounded the courthouse, carrying signs demanding criminal charges against surviving officials connected to the original investigation. Former officers faced harassment and threats. Elderly residents stopped speaking to reporters entirely. The town no longer trusted anyone. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued excavating land surrounding the abandoned farm property Reeves referenced during his infirmary confession. Cadaver dogs alerted repeatedly across multiple locations near the collapsed well and surrounding woods. Investigators uncovered animal remains, discarded trash, and old farming debris at first. Then another human bone fragment surfaced, less than 50 yards from where Sarah Bennett's body had been buried. The discovery triggered a full-scale excavation operation under floodlights while snowstorms rolled across the countryside. Reporters watched from distant barricades as forensic anthropologists worked carefully through frozen earth hour after hour. 3 days later, authorities confirmed investigators had uncovered partial remains belonging to another unidentified female victim. Bellmere entered complete psychological freefall. The second body appeared older than Sarah Bennett's remains, possibly dating back to the early 1970s, according to preliminary forensic estimates. Prosecutors refused to speculate publicly about identity until DNA testing concluded. But privately, investigators feared the remains could belong to Rebecca Nolan or Lydia Grant, the two women linked previously to Reeves through old church conferences and disappearances in neighboring states. Detectives reviewing Reeves's ministry schedule discovered he visited the abandoned farm property frequently during the 1970s under the pretense of helping a retired parishioner maintain the land. The parishioner himself died decades earlier. No one questioned why Reeves continued visiting the isolated property afterward. Inside county jail, Daniel Reeves appeared increasingly disconnected from reality. Medical staff reported episodes of confusion, insomnia, and severe chest pain. Yet whenever detectives attempted follow-up interviews about the newly discovered remains, Reeves alternated between cryptic religious statements and complete silence. At one point, he reportedly smiled faintly while listening to news coverage about the excavation before whispering, "The ground remembers everything eventually." Prosecutors debated whether Reeves's deteriorating mental state would render him unfit for trial. Entirely. Emily Harper's family panicked again at the possibility of losing formal justice after waiting nearly 4 decades. Thomas Harper began appearing publicly more often, giving emotional interviews outside the courthouse, demanding Reeves answer directly for what he did. During one nationally televised appearance, Thomas held up a photograph of Emily smiling beside St. Luke's choir members and stared directly into the cameras. "He stole her life," he said quietly. "Then he stole the truth from all of us." The interview spread across the country within hours. Sympathy for Bellmere shifted into collective horror as more survivors connected to Reeves emerged. Publicly, several women filed civil lawsuits against St. Luke's church leadership, alleging decades of institutional negligence, intimidation, and emotional abuse surrounding Reeves's conduct. Former parishioners described being discouraged aggressively from questioning the pastor under any circumstances. One woman claimed church elders warned her during the 1980s that criticizing Reeves meant challenging God's authority. Another alleged she was pressured into silence after reporting inappropriate behavior during counseling sessions. Detectives investigating church leadership found no evidence others participated knowingly in violent crimes. But they increasingly believed Bellmere's culture of blind trust allowed Reeves to operate unchecked. For years, then forensic analysts identified the second set of remains from the abandoned farm. The victim was 21-year-old Lydia Grant, the Kansas Bible study volunteer who vanished in 1979 after receiving counseling from Reeves during a regional church event. Dental records and mitochondrial DNA confirmed the identification conclusively. Prosecutors announced the findings during a packed press conference broadcast live nationwide. Gasps reportedly filled the room when authorities confirmed Reeves now stood connected through evidence to multiple dead women spanning over a decade. Bellmere residents watching from home described the moment as emotionally devastating beyond words. The pastor who once represented morality itself had transformed officially into something else. Entirely. Something predatory, something hidden, something evil wearing the face of trust. Yet investigators still lacked complete understanding of how many victims truly existed. The hidden basement beneath St. Luke's continued producing evidence almost weekly. Additional photographs surfaced showing unidentified young women attending church retreats with Reeves across multiple states. Several names connected to those images remained unresolved inside missing persons databases even. Decades later, federal agents expanded inquiries into at least 7 cold cases potentially tied to Reeves's ministry travels. The scale of a nightmare kept growing. Then came the discovery that terrified investigators more than anything else so far. While examining structural areas beneath St. Luke's Church using modern ground scanning technology, forensic teams identified a large concealed cavity sealed behind concrete sometime during the late 1980s. The space did not appear on any architectural blueprints. Prosecutors immediately halted all access to the church while engineers prepared safe entry into the hidden chamber. News helicopters circled overhead continuously as workers cut carefully through aging concrete walls. Beneath the sanctuary floor, Belmere held its breath, waiting to learn what else Daniel Reeves buried beneath the church where generations once gathered to worship. The moment workers broke through the concrete wall beneath St. Luke's Church, the smell hit first. Thick, rotten, ancient. Detectives standing inside the narrow underground corridor instinctively covered their mouths as stale air rolled outward from the hidden chamber sealed beneath the sanctuary floor for decades. Flashlights cut through drifting dust while forensic teams pushed cautiously into the darkness. Above them, beyond layers of wood, stone, and stained glass, the church remained silent. Empty pews, dark prayer candles. The same sanctuary where Daniel Reeves preached about salvation every Sunday now stood directly over. Something investigators feared might destroy Belmere forever. The concealed chamber stretched farther underground than anyone expected, roughly 20 feet long. Reinforced with old timber supports and hidden completely behind poured concrete likely installed. Sometime after Emily Harper's murder, detectives immediately noticed shelves lining the walls, boxes stacked carefully, plastic containers sealed with duct tape, a rusted metal desk positioned beneath a hanging bulb that no longer worked. The room did not resemble a burial site. It resembled an archive, a private world hidden beneath the church where Reeves stored pieces of a life nobody else was supposed to see. Forensic photographers documented everything methodically while investigators opened containers one by one beneath portable floodlights. Inside the first boxes, they found more photographs, hundreds of them. Young women from church events across multiple decades, choir rehearsals, retreats, baptisms, counseling groups. Many subjects appeared unaware they were being photographed at all. Some images focused obsessively on specific women from different angles, almost like surveillance. Emily Harper appeared constantly throughout the collection. So did Lydia Grant. So did Sarah Bennett. And then investigators began noticing women they could not identify at all. The second set of containers held cassette tapes similar to those recovered earlier from Reeves's office, but far more disturbing. Some recordings contained counseling sessions. Others captured private conversations Reeves apparently recorded secretly inside church rooms, vehicles, and ministry trips without anyone's knowledge. Detectives listening through headphones reportedly removed them repeatedly in visible disgust as Reeves manipulated vulnerable women emotionally under the guise of spiritual guidance. The language followed patterns investigators now recognized clearly: isolation, shame, dependence, control. Reeves positioned himself as protector, confessor, and moral authority simultaneously until boundaries dissolved completely. Then forensic technicians opened a locked trunk sitting beneath the metal desk. The atmosphere inside the chamber changed immediately. Several detectives later admitted they knew instinctively something terrible waited inside before the lid even lifted fully. The trunk contained personal belongings wrapped carefully in newspaper and cloth, jewelry, wallets, driver's licenses, church name tags, hairbrushes, photographs torn from family albums. At least 15 different women appeared represented inside the collection. Some were already identified through previous investigations. Others remained completely unknown. One evidence technician reportedly stepped away from the trunk and vomited against the wall after, realizing Reeves had likely preserved trophies from victims spanning decades. Then came the discovery that froze the room completely silent. Hidden beneath the bottom layer of belongings, investigators uncovered several small spiral notebooks, covered in black leather. Reeves's journals, detailed journals. Prosecutors transported them immediately under armed supervision to a secure evidence facility while forensic document specialists began examination overnight. The contents horrified everyone who read them. Reeves documented years of obsession, manipulation, emotional fixation, and violent fantasies in meticulous detail. Some entries read like prayers. Others resembled confessions written by a man slowly losing control over his own impulses. Women were described not as people, but as symbols, temptations, tests, threats to his sacred calling. Emily Harper appeared throughout the journals more frequently than anyone else. Reeves described her as pure enough to expose corruption simply by seeing it. One entry dated September 1987 referenced Emily directly. "She no longer looks at me with trust," Reeves wrote. "I feel judgment in her silence." Another entry only days before the murder became one of the prosecution's most devastating pieces of evidence. "If she destroys everything," Reeves wrote carefully, "then God must forgive what follows." Belmere erupted once news leaked about the journals and hidden chamber. Residents gathered outside St. Luke's Church in near hysteria while national reporters described the underground room as a cathedral of secrets. Former parishioners openly wept during televised interviews. Several elderly church members who defended Reeves publicly for months disappeared from public view. Entirely after details from the journal surfaced, the illusion finally collapsed beyond repair. Daniel Reeves was no longer viewed as a beloved pastor accused of isolated violence. He was becoming something far darker in the public imagination, a predator who built an entire life around trust while secretly collecting evidence of suffering beneath the church itself. But investigators were not finished uncovering horrors inside the chamber. During forensic excavation along the rear wall, ground-penetrating radar identified another anomaly beneath the concrete floor. Workers cut carefully through old foundation material while detectives watched in tense silence. Several feet below the chamber surface, forensic teams uncovered human remains. Female, young, buried directly beneath St. Luke's Church. Belmere's nightmare reached a new level instantly. Authorities sealed the entire area and suspended media access while forensic anthropologists worked around the clock identifying the victim. Preliminary analysis suggested the remains dated back decades. Prosecutors feared the body might belong to another missing woman connected to Reeves's ministry. Rumors exploded nationwide before official confirmation even arrived. Social media users called St. Luke's the Church of Graves. Conspiracy theories spread wildly. Some claimed multiple bodies remained hidden beneath the property. Others accused church leadership of participating knowingly in cover-ups spanning generations. Detectives fought desperately to separate evidence from panic as the investigation spiraled larger. By the day, then the identification came back. The remains belonged to Angela Price, the 19-year-old Indiana church volunteer who vanished during a ministry conference in 1983 after reportedly arguing privately with Reeves near a parking lot. For nearly 40 years, her family believed she might still be alive somewhere. Instead, she had been buried beneath St. Luke's Church while Daniel Reeves preached above her grave every Sunday. Angela's surviving mother collapsed during a televised press conference announcing the identification. The footage spread across the country within hours. Bellemere's name became synonymous with betrayal, hidden evil, and institutional failure. Federal authorities expanded the investigation again immediately. Excavation teams searched every accessible section beneath St. Luke's while agents reviewed missing persons cases tied to Reeves across 6 different states. Detectives no longer doubted the scope of what they were uncovering. Daniel Reeves was almost certainly a serial killer. The only remaining question was how many victims existed. Meanwhile, Reeves himself seemed to sense the walls closing permanently around his legacy. Jail staff described his condition worsening dramatically after news of Angela Price's remains reached the media. He stopped eating almost entirely. He refused medication repeatedly. Several guards reported hearing him pray aloud for hours during the night. Yet whenever detectives attempted additional interviews, Reeves retreated behind vague, religious language again. At one point, Detective Dwyer confronted him directly with photographs recovered from the underground chamber. "How many women did you hurt?" Dwyer demanded. Reeves stared at the images quietly before whispering, "I try to save them from corruption." The answer disgusted investigators completely. Prosecutors now believed Reeves rationalized violence through distorted theology for decades. Women who challenged him, rejected him, or threatened exposure became symbols of moral danger in his fractured mind. Killing them allowed him to preserve the public identity he worshipped above everything else. His church, his authority, his image. Bellemere struggled to survive psychologically beneath the revelations. St. Luke's officially dissolved its congregation after nearly 70 years in operation. The building itself stood abandoned under constant police supervision while debates erupted over whether it should be demolished completely. Some residents wanted the structure burned to the ground. Others argued destroying it would erase evidence and memory together. Vigils for victims replaced Sunday services. Families connected to missing women traveled from across the country, placing flowers outside police barricades around the church. Detectives continued identifying items recovered from Reeves's hidden chamber. Several belongings matched unresolved disappearances investigators never previously connected to. Bellemere. One bracelet belonged to a Missouri teenager missing since 1976. A driver's license matched a college student who vanished during a church retreat in Nebraska during 1984. The evidence web surrounding Reeves expanded almost daily now. Yet despite everything uncovered beneath St. Luke's, investigators still feared worse remained hidden. Because one section of Reeves's journals referenced the orchard repeatedly in coded passages, prosecutors could not fully interpret. Detectives eventually traced the references to another abandoned property once owned by a retired church elder outside Bellemere. According to land records, Reeves visited the location frequently throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s. Prosecutors secured search warrants immediately. News helicopters followed forensic teams through snow-covered roads toward the property while residents watched live broadcasts from home in stunned silence. By now, Bellemere understood a terrible truth. Every place connected to Daniel Reeves seemed to conceal another secret, another victim, another layer of horror buried beneath decades of trust. And somewhere inside county jail, weakened by illness but still alive, the old pastor remained the only man who knew where all the graves were hidden. The orchard sat 3 miles outside Bellemere beyond a stretch of frozen farmland where dead trees twisted against the winter sky like black veins across the horizon. Most residents barely remembered the property existed. Decades earlier, it belonged to an elderly church elder named Samuel Vickers who donated fruit. Harvest to St. Luke's every autumn before dementia forced him into assisted care during the late 1980s. After his death, the land fell into neglect. Trees rotted slowly. Buildings collapsed inward. Nature swallowed the property year after year until only fragments remained visible from the road. Yet according to Daniel Reeves's journals, the orchard carried enormous significance. He referred to it repeatedly using strange phrases. The quiet place. The garden beneath judgment, where silence stays buried. Detectives driving toward the location felt the same dread that accompanied every new discovery. Connected to Reeves. Each search seemed to uncover another layer of darkness nobody imagined possible. Belmere had already transformed from a grieving small town into the center of one of the largest serial murder investigations in modern American history. Prosecutors now suspected Reeves committed crimes across at least 15 years while hiding beneath the identity of a trusted pastor. Federal agents established command tents near the orchard before sunrise while cadaver dogs swept the frozen property carefully between rows of dead apple trees. News helicopters circled overhead again, broadcasting live images across the country. Residents watched from homes, diners, motel rooms, and hospital waiting areas in total silence. Nobody in Belmere expected good news anymore. Around noon, one of the cadaver dogs alerted near a collapsed tool shed partially buried beneath snow and vines. Investigators cleared debris slowly, while forensic teams scanned the ground beneath rusted floorboards. Almost immediately, radar equipment identified irregularities underground. Excavation crews began digging carefully through frozen soil, while television commentators speculated live about what might be hidden there. By evening, investigators uncovered human remains, then another set nearby, then a third. The orchard became a full-scale crime scene overnight. Floodlights illuminated the property through darkness, while forensic anthropologists worked beneath. Falling snow hour after hour, recovering bones from shallow graves hidden between tree roots and collapsed fencing. Belmere broke emotionally once the scope of the excavation leaked publicly. Families connected to missing women flooded local hotels and community centers, waiting desperately for identification updates. Some carried photographs decades old. Others carried hope they now hated themselves for still having. Detectives established crisis counseling stations throughout town after several residents suffered panic attacks watching the orchard searches unfold live on television. St. Luke's Church remained dark in the background of every news broadcast, like a monument to betrayal. Inside county jail, Daniel Reeves reportedly asked guards whether the orchard had been disturbed. The question alone terrified investigators. Detective Alan Dwyer confronted Reeves directly the following morning with photographs from the excavation site spread across a metal table. "Who did you bury there?" Dwyer demanded. Reeves stared at the images for several moments before whispering, "Some souls wanted peace." Dwyer slammed his fist against the table hard enough to startle nearby guards. "You murdered them." Reeves closed his eyes slowly. "I carried their suffering," he murmured. Detectives increasingly believed Reeves no longer separated himself psychologically from his crimes. Years of distorted theology, narcissism, and emotional control had fused into something profoundly dangerous. He viewed himself simultaneously as sinner, savior, punisher, and victim. The journals recovered beneath St. Luke's revealed a man obsessed with purity and terrified of exposure. Women who rejected his authority became threats to the carefully constructed identity protecting him from consequences. Violence allowed him to erase danger while preserving the illusion of holiness the town worshipped for decades. But the orchard uncovered evidence even more horrifying than investigators expected. Forensic analysis confirmed at least 4 separate female victims buried on the property. One was identified quickly as Rebecca Nolan, the 19-year-old Missouri church volunteer who vanished after Reeves preached at a regional youth conference in 1974. Her family had spent nearly 50 years believing she ran away voluntarily. Instead, she spent those decades beneath frozen ground while Reeves delivered sermons about compassion and redemption every Sunday morning. Another set of remains belonged to an unidentified teenage girl between 15 and 17 years old. No missing persons match surfaced immediately. Detectives feared she might represent an entirely unknown victim never connected publicly to Reeves before. The realization chilled investigators deeply. If unidentified victims existed, then the true scale of Reeves's crimes might extend far beyond current evidence. The Orchard searches continued for nearly 2 weeks. Each day brought new discoveries: jewelry, torn clothing fragments, rusted zipper pulls, personal effects preserved in sealed evidence bags beneath portable lights while snowstorms rolled. Across the countryside, prosecutors eventually confirmed the property functioned as a disposal site Reeves used, intermittently over years. Tire impressions preserved beneath older soil layers suggested vehicles accessed the orchard repeatedly during the 1970s and early 1980s. Investigators also uncovered burned fragments of church documents near one grave site, including partial choir attendance records from St. Luke's Church. Belmere's horror transformed gradually into collective rage. Protesters gathered daily outside the county jail, demanding Reeves face execution despite his age and deteriorating health. Families of victims accused church leadership, law enforcement, and town officials of enabling decades of silence through blind trust and institutional protection. Lawsuits